Welcome everyone to Bennett Adelson's Microsoft Teams Crash Course. My name is Judi Pfancuff. I'm the Director of User Adoption at Bennett Adelson. And before we get started today, I want to introduce Brian Conley, who wants to welcome everyone and give you a little background on the course. So Brian, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Judy. So yes, this is Brian Conley. I'm a Senior Sales Associate with Bennett Adelson. I've been here for the last 8 years. Just wanted to thank everybody. These are trying times. We all recognize the pandemic going on. We've seen a tremendous increase in remote works, and we figured this was a fantastic time to bring some value out there to the people that are trying to use Teams as a remote technology. Judy's going to share with everybody really some great ways to quickly bring adoption up and help your workforce. So with that, I throw it back to Judy.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to switch my screen to back to my PowerPoint for just a second. We're not going to be very PowerPoint heavy today, but did want to get off on the right foot with a couple of goals for the session. I wanted you to know that by the time we're done, you will be able to schedule and conduct meetings in Teams, or at least you'll know how to. You'll know how to use chat and calling, and you'll have a basic understanding of what the shared workspace in Teams looks like. We're not going to emphasize that part of Teams too much because not everyone is, an assigned member of a team, and we wanted to really focus on the tips and things that we think will be useful for everybody. So, so that's where we're going. You should be able to do everything I demonstrate today if Teams is functioning properly on your workstation, with the caveat that different organizations have different settings, and we do know that and so you'll have to be aware of it. So let me take care of that. Okay. So let's see. I talked about you'll be. I didn't say this out loud. You should expect to be able to do just about everything I demonstrate today. So I do encourage you to try things, and that's the part that I failed to say. So we're meeting in Teams. That means that you have access to the Teams environment during the meeting, and you should be able to follow along with most of the things that we demo. If you do accidentally cut yourself off during the meeting, and I've done that myself, you can join by going back to the calendar area in Teams, find this meeting, and click the join button. So let's move on. I'm going to come back to sharing my desktop because I want to talk a little bit about how the meeting looks. And when I do that, Teams automatically assumes I want to make the meeting small. So it turns it into this thumbnail down in the right corner. I just click on it and bring the meeting back to full screen. I wanted to show you, I have this by clicking the show or hide participants button here. It just toggles between the two. We show the participant pane or the people list. So this shows us who's in the meeting, and we have a mute all button. And so I've clicked that. And we've done that because sometimes in a larger group you get distracting background noise and so forth. I wanted to point out that only the presenter should use that button during a meeting. And the reason is because when you click it, you mute everyone except yourself. So if someone else is talking and you click it because somebody's background noise is bugging you, you'll have muted the presenter. So it's a good idea in a case like that to just ask the presenter to click the mute all button. The other thing, while we're on the subject, I'll just mention there's no way for anyone else to unmute you. Only you can unmute yourself. You do that if you move your cursor anywhere in the meeting space, this menu bar pops up, and you see the microphone button, and that toggles back and forth between mute and unmute. So you can unmute yourself that way. Okay, even though you're muted, we do want to do our best to answer your questions, and that means we kind of want to hear from you. So I'm going to click now the show conversation button, and it replaces the people pane with meeting chat. So right now we're showing, people have joined. It looks like somebody, oh, and my colleague Anthony started a recording, and I unclicked it because I wasn't sure who had started it, Anthony. So I restarted the recording right before we started. So we'll talk about the recording in just a sec, but what I wanted to point out is that you can type messages right down here at the bottom. Please feel free to do that. If something comes up and it's not clear, go ahead and type in your question. We've got a few people on the line from Bennett Adelson who should feel free to jump in and answer any question that you know the answer to. And otherwise, I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat as we go through. And at the end of the meeting, also, if you've still got a question, don't hang up. I will stick around and we can chat to make sure that we answer everything we can for you. Okay, so we're familiar with the basics of the meeting space. The first thing I really wanted to dive into was scheduling meetings in Teams. Oh, I promised I was going to mention recording and then I forgot. You see this banner up at the top. You've got something similar. You can just dismiss that to get it out of the way. We will be posting, or our intention is to post a recording of the session on our website. So that's why we're recording. So as I mentioned, I want to talk about scheduling meetings in Teams. And the first thing I'm going to say is that I continue to schedule most meetings in Outlook. And you may find that you do that too. So let's just go ahead and toggle to Outlook and take a look at how that works. So if everything is set up and all the options are set up properly, when you go to the calendar portion of Outlook, you'll see this new Teams meeting button in the ribbon. So that's a great way to start a new Teams meeting. If you're like me and you're a creature of habit, you may find yourself continuing to click the old new appointment button. And luckily, right inside, as soon as the draft meeting pops up, you see an option in the ribbon there. So it results in exactly the same thing if you had remembered to click the Teams meeting button in the first place. It fills in Microsoft Teams meeting as the location, and it puts in this header where the link to the meeting appears. And then you just fill it in like you would for any other Outlook meeting. So I'm going to leave that open for now, but let's head back to Teams and see how you set up a meeting in Teams. So you do it from the calendar area. So this area that I'm pointing to now, the far left side of your screen, is the left nav bar in Teams. And we're going to go to the calendar space in order to set up a meeting. So when we get here, it shows us you have some options over how to set your view of your calendar. And up here in the upper right corner is the button to start, or to schedule, I should say, a new meeting. It's a simplified interface, as you can see. There are some things you can do. Actually, there are quite a few things you can do in Outlook that you can't do here, such as you can set the importance of a meeting, which we don't have that option here. But it actually is quite functional, and you may find that that this is your default method. Most of this is pretty straightforward and obvious. You give your meeting a title, you type names in, and it works just like Outlook. It'll suggest names out of the Active Directory for your attendees. Set your date and time. You can set up a recurring meeting in Teams. I'm going to skip over this. Add a channel. Wherever you see the word channel related to Teams, that's referring to the shared workspace where people are working in assigned teams in Teams. And the teams have channels. And we'll maybe talk about that a little later, but I don't think we'll talk about meetings in a channel that's more of an advanced topic. Location, you probably won't need that. That would be if you needed a physical location. I find that Bennett Adelson doesn't have, and most of our clients don't even have their conference room schedule accessible this way. If I click on it, we just get some tests here. So that's because, you know, it's a virtual meeting, but you can type in the name of a location if you need one or want one. You also have a scheduling assistant. It's a tab here up at the top of the page. So once you have a few more attendees, it'll help you find a time when everyone's available. So, so that's how it looks setting up a meeting in Teams. And while we're here, I just want to point out the Meet Now button. I really like this. It's new. I don't know exactly when it started appearing, 3 or 4 months ago, maybe. We used to have this in Skype and I missed it in Teams, and now we have it. So that's great. So this is great for if you want to go into a meeting space, make sure your camera is pointed in the right direction, make sure your hair looks okay, whatever you want to see yourself. You immediately go into a meeting and you're the only participant. I'm not clicking the button because it'll take me out of the meeting we're in right now. But then you can, once you get there, you can also invite people to join you there. I find myself using it a lot because I do a lot of training and documentation, and I want to remind myself exactly how things work in Teams, what the buttons are called, and so forth. And it's a great way to go in and just do a practice session if you're getting ready to lead a big meeting. So so that's that. Oh, I want, before we get away from scheduling meetings, I want to mention a lot of times people ask, can they invite people external to their organization to Teams meetings? The answer is absolutely yes. If you're familiar with Skype, it's much the same situation. People get your meeting request. It has the link in it to join the Teams meeting. When they click the link, they get the option of joining on the web version or on their desktop app, and that's their choice. So there was one other thing that I'm going to go back to that Outlook meeting that we started. There are some options that you might be interested in. Way down at the bottom in the footer, you actually have to click Control and then click Meeting Options. And this gives you a chance to set it up so that, the default setting is that external people invited to a meeting have to wait in the lobby until someone inside the organization lets them in, someone who's already in the meeting. If you want to bypass that, you click that meeting options link and you can change this to everyone can bypass the lobby instead of just people in my organization, which is what is usually the default. And you also have a setting here for who can present. So that can be handy and good to know. Okay, so I think that's just about everything I was going to say. Oh, I was about the lobby. Also good to know, because it gets confusing. If an external person joins the meeting before there are any internal participants in the meeting, they will get put into the lobby. So if they happen to be the first one to show up, they have to wait in the lobby. Otherwise, if somebody's there already, they'll just come right straight into the meeting. Okay. I'm going to switch back quickly now to my PowerPoint. So I have to remember, I said if you get lost, come back to calendar and click join. So I'm going to, even though I didn't drop off the meeting, I lost my little thumbnail. So I just click join, and I'm going to come back here to stop sharing this screen and start sharing the screen with the PowerPoint on it again. And I'll click to advance it. And because I wanted to show you just a couple of screen captures of things that I couldn't show you while the meeting was in progress. So bear with me. I took this in my poorly lit home office the other day. So this is what the screen looks like when you're getting ready to join a meeting. And I just want to point out a couple things. When you get ready to click that Join Now button, get in the habit before you do it of looking at the settings below here to make sure you have things set up the way you want. One good default is to get in the habit of turning the camera on. I know a lot of us are squeamish about it. I'm certainly one of those people. But it's a great habit, especially now when so many of us are working remotely. It really improves communications. You'd be surprised when you can see people's facial expressions. You get a much better sense of whether they're with you or whether they have questions and so forth. This next button that's turned on here in this case is to blur the background. And that's a fairly new feature. It might not be rolled out to your organization yet, but especially in a home office where backgrounds can be a little bit distracting, you can turn that on and just get the focus a little bit more on you and not on that pile of laundry in the corner. And then the third thing I want to make a case for is always joining a meeting with your microphone muted. And that's because a lot of times you don't realize how much background noise might be going on in your environment. And if you join with the mute on, and then as soon as you get into the meeting, go ahead and turn it off and say hello to everyone. That way, if immediately people start hearing background noise, they'll know that it's you. And likewise, what happens to me a lot, I might start a meeting on my phone. And then when I sit down at my desk and join on the computer, I forget that the phone microphone is on and speaker, as well as the mic and speaker on the computer. And that can cause some pretty nasty feedback. So when you unmute yourself, if the feedback starts, you can quickly mute yourself again and not be the cause of a lot of complaints by your fellow meeting goers. So my next slide shows what it looks like when you're sharing your screen in a Teams meeting. So this is something that comes up quite a bit when you're trying to get actual work done, and the meetings are focused on maybe a website or maybe a file or what have you. So this can look a little daunting at first. So it's not that bad, really. Let me just point out what at the time I did this, I had two screens going. So if I wanted to share my entire desktop, I had my choice of screen one or screen two. Now, if you really only want to share a Word document and you've got a bunch of other things open and you think it might be distracting or you don't want to worry about it, you can go to share window instead and search. As it turns out, I did not have a Word document open at the time, but if I say I just wanted to share this PowerPoint, I could select that window. And the only downside of doing that is if you're jumping back and forth between applications, that can get a little clunky and you may feel it's better to share your whole screen. So those are the primary options. We are also set up, and I'm not sure that every organization will be, but this group of PowerPoints, I did have one open at the time, but you can see that it's showing me half a dozen more. These are recent PowerPoints that I've had open. If you share a PowerPoint in a Teams meeting, it's pretty cool. You get some controls right inside the meeting to advance slides, and the individual participants. You know, if you've ever been in a meeting and somebody keeps saying, "Could you go back to that last slide?" The nice thing about sharing a PowerPoint this way is that people can do that themselves, and then there's a button for them to sync up with where you are in the presentation. So that might be something you want to look into. The whiteboard then is another relatively new option that rolled out early this year. Not everyone is going to have it. I know the government tenants don't have it yet, but that can be really handy if you're a person that likes to sketch out your ideas. then by all means use the whiteboard. This pink tile here, this is an add-in app that we don't use at Bennett Adelson. I'm not sure, there might even be a cost associated with that. We don't use too many add-in apps, so I can't really speak to that, but wanted you to see, you know, when you go to share your screen. Oh, and actually, as if that weren't enough options for you, there's one more important thing. This box up here that says include system audio. If you plan to share a video or any other kind of file that has audio associated with it, be sure and click that box. And if you do like I would probably do and forget, then when you do start sharing, what you'll have to do is stop sharing and then share again. And this time, remember to click the box. Otherwise, your fellow participants will not be able to hear your audio. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen that has the meeting in it so that we can all, and again, it makes it into a thumbnail. So I make it full screen just by clicking on that thumbnail. So let's look at some of the settings that participants control during the meeting. So I think I mentioned this, you just move your cursor to pop up this menu bar that is right here in the middle of the page down towards the bottom. And we already looked at the show conversation, and I should look at that again to see, oh, what is the participant limit for teams? That's a great question, Brian. You can have 250 people in a meeting like this one, a regular Teams meeting. You can, if you schedule a live event in Teams, which almost everyone will have the ability to do, you can have up to 10,000 people. So the controls for live events are different. There's a bit more technology involved. And, you know, if you need more than 250 people, that's your only choice. But if you don't, chances are you'll be able to do everything you want to do in a regular Teams meeting, where you'll have a chance to become more proficient probably. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so we talked about the menu bar, and we're looking at show conversation. Notice that there are some icons down here below the type a new message box, and these are things that you'll want to take a look at. I'm going to look at some of them a bit more. We have similar icons when we get into chat in Teams, but if you wanted to share, if you wanted to attach a file, you would click the attach icon. Pretty good thinking there. If you wanted more control over the formatting of your message, you can click this format icon. And this is my first chance to point out the more options ellipse. We'll be clicking on this a lot during the course of the session today. There are, I just can't stress this enough, wherever you see the more options ellipse in Teams, go ahead and click it. It doesn't do anything except pop up a menu, and there are a lot of Easter eggs hidden in these menus, a lot of cool things that you might want to get familiar with. So don't hesitate to do that. Okay. Let's see. I was going to talk a little bit about sharing files in the meeting. Oh yeah, so I mentioned here, click the paperclip. You can upload a file from your computer. Here we go. Here's a etiquette document. Actually, that belongs to our client, so I can't share that. Never mind. I'm not going to actually share a document, but you get the idea. It's just like, you know, uploading a file like you do in many other applications. But some things to be aware of. Depending on settings in your organization, guests will only be able to see files that you've shared if they are joined in the meeting. Somebody asked why they aren't seeing the icons in their chat window. I can't answer that, Catherine. I don't know. I see them when if you're joined on the web, I still think you should see them. Can multiple people share screens at the same time? I do not think so. I've never tried to do that. And I know that whenever one person starts sharing, in my experience, it stops sharing the other person's window. So back to, oops. Yeah, so Catherine, I don't know. There might be something about being in our environment that's giving you limited. And Paul says you don't see them in the web version. I never noticed that before. To be honest, I don't find myself formatting messages in a meeting that much. So I've been, using Teams every day for over a year, and I never even noticed that. And I do use the web version quite a bit. So hopefully it won't be a problem for you, but good to know. It seems like you learn something new almost every day with Teams. So, okay, I'm going to get back to the thing about guests. They'll only see a file if they're joined to the meeting when you share it. And likewise, chat in a meeting actually persists in Teams. You'll be able to find it later in the chat area. If the meeting is taking place in your organization. But your guests who might be joined to the meeting will probably not be able to see the chat after the meeting. I think there's a administration, the admins can change a setting possibly to change it, because I know when we participate in Microsoft meetings, we can see the chat afterwards, but most of the time they won't. So if you work with a lot of guests, keep that in mind, that sharing during the meeting has some limitations for them. Okay, let's look at some of the other meeting controls that you have. So we're back down here in the menu bar. And again, an ellipse. Let's click it and see what we get. Here are, you can check and make sure that your headset is being recognized in device settings. You can talk into your speaker and and get a little sound check in advance of the meeting. You can enter full screen, and that makes some of the stuff around the edges go away. It is something to keep in mind that when you're sharing screen in a Teams meeting, a lot of times it can be hard to see if you're sharing a Word document. I always try to remember to zoom it up a little bit, and I usually have my browser set at 125% anyhow. So those are nice things to do for your participants. I mentioned blur background. You can also choose to blur it during the meeting. I'll show you what that looks like when I blur my background. It doesn't change too much. My background is pretty plain. I don't like it because it makes my hair look funny. So, but in the right environment and circumstances, it can be really handy. Oh, I'm going to turn on live captions. I'm not sure everybody will have this. This is also a relatively new feature that's being rolled out. So it can be distracting. If I know when my kids come over and watch TV at my house and I have closed captions on, that drives them crazy. So I'll leave them on in the thought that maybe it will be helpful to some people. The main thing I wanted to point out here is the recording button. Notice that I mentioned earlier that Anthony started the recording and then I stopped it. Anybody in your meeting can stop the recording at any time. So keep that in mind. We hope you won't do that today, because we would like to post this on the website. But it's handy to know, especially as a participant. You have to be in the same environment as the person who organized the meeting to do that. If the person who started the recording leaves the meeting and the meeting continues, the recording continues. But then after the meeting, or whenever the recording is stopped, it gets, the file gets compiled or whatever that's called. And then the recording gets stored in Microsoft Stream. So if you use videos, you'll need to get familiar with Microsoft Stream if you're not already. There are some great capabilities for adding captions, for example, and making that recording available broadly in your organization if you want to. And to do that, you have to do it in Stream. So that wraps up everything we were going to say about meetings in this introduction. So now let's move on and look at the chat area. So again, we go back to the left rail and we just simply click on chat. And this is my actual workspace. I didn't have time to set up a good total demo account, so bear with me. But I did try to do some housekeeping so it wouldn't be a total mess in here. So this list here next to the left rail organizes your chats chronologically. Unless you have pinned a chat. So again, see the ellipse here next to this chat? When I click on that, I get some options, and one of them is this pin or unpin toggle. So pinned chats just stay up at the top. You can, if you have more than one, you can put them in the order that you want them and so forth. And that can make things a little easier to find. Let's talk about starting a new chat. I think this is a really small little icon up here in the top bar, but here it is. Click new chat. And let's just say that I want to start a new chat with my colleague Rick here. We were just looking at my chat with him. And as soon as I select him from Active Directory, that same chat history pops up. And this is pointing out to you something that's important to understand if you're a Skype user, and that is that in Teams, chat is persistent. I can go back, I tested it last night, and I can go back, scroll back, and see the chats that I've had with Rick for the past year. So I think if there were more content and so forth, it might start to get deleted. I don't think there's any guarantee of how long they'll be there, but they are persistent and they do last. Now, if Rick's the only person I want to talk to, I just hit enter here, and it takes me right back into this ongoing chat with Rick. Down at the bottom is where I can start typing in my new message if I want to. So one thing, while I talk about this idea of persistence, it is true, just like in Skype, the chats are private. Only the people that are engaged in the chat see this content. But of course, if you're sharing your desktop during a meeting or whatever, you might inadvertently share chat content. So that's something to keep in mind. During the chat up here in the right corner, you can progress to a video call or an audio call if typing just gets to be too much of a drag, which it often does. You can also share your desktop during a chat. So that's an option. I'm going to skip over the people button. We'll come back to that in a second. I wanted to point out, so for some reason, Teams keeps collapsing this list, but each chat has a set of tabs that are default. Every chat has a chat tab, and that's where the messaging takes place. And every chat also has a files chat. And what that means, or files tab, excuse me, what that means is if any files, or in this case, images were shared in the course of this chat, they end up here in a fairly easy to search. So for a whole year's worth of chats, my files list with Rick isn't that long. And I can come in here if I know we shared something in a chat and find it pretty easily. I'm not going to talk the organization tab. If your organization has it set up, it will show an org chart for the individual that you're chatting with. This only appears in a one-on-one chat. And likewise, this activity tab, this is shows their activity in the Teams channels. So I don't use that too much, but that might come in handy. So let's see. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about group chat. So this is a small group chat. It's only 3 of us here, but group chats are special. And to create one, you just click up here on the people icon. So if it's a new chat, you can just add more than one name to the invitee list when you're starting out. Or if it's a chat that's already underway, you can add people up here by clicking this icon in the far right corner. So let's click add people, and let's say we're going to invite our colleague Mark. to the chat. So we get some options. This default is set in our organization to don't include chat history. So maybe Mark doesn't need to see everything Rick and I have talked about, or Rick and Jason and I have talked about for the past year. And but we do want to bring him in because we've got a new topic that we want to get him involved in. On the other hand, maybe he's new to our group and we do want him to see everything we've talked about. So we have that option as well. And then we have this option in the middle where you can specify how many days of chat you want him to see. So that can be really handy. So, oh, you can also name group chats. You see this little pencil up here. This just has the guys' names, but if I click the pencil and call it, you know, the awesome customer focus team chat, then they will see that name as well. So when you do name them, you name it for everybody, but everybody in the chat has the ability to go in and rename it. So that could be fun, I suppose. One thing I wanted to point out, because I didn't realize this for a long time, but meeting chat also shows up in the chat area of Teams. So when I click on the meeting that we're in right now, for example, we see the chat for our meeting that's going on. And I'm not going to get sucked into this discussion about icons. Mark is saying persistent chat, and he's right. Admins can change the settings to decide how long it's appropriate for chat to persist. And Alexis asks, I don't have the left menu where it shows. So this is this activity chat. I'm not sure, Alexis, which menu. If you're referring to the left rail, you definitely should have that whether you're in a meeting or not. You might have clicked the full screen button. If you click escape, it will take you out of full screen. And that's the only thing I can think of. So go back to my notes here. So again, keep in mind, people who are guests in your organization may not be able to go back to the chat for the meeting. You guys won't be able to come back to the chat for this meeting. And that's why I'm going to mention a few times that I'm going to stay in the chat area for a while after we close the meeting. And if you just don't hit hang up, you and we can keep chatting to make sure everything gets answered to the extent that we can. So let's see, we were going to talk about formatting messages again. So let's go back to my chat with Rick. So if I type a new message to Rick, and what I frequently type to Rick is, I need help. Then I also have this format icon, and hopefully everybody's seeing it this time. So you get these HTML controls over text formatting. And also don't forget the ellipse because again, there's some good stuff in here. I really can never remember the keyboard shortcut for undo. You'd think I would know it as many million times as I've needed to undo things, but it's hidden under here. So there are the other icons. You can make your chat important or even urgent by using the exclamation point. You can attach a file here, just like in a meeting. You have the emoji button. I love that they're searchable. I needed surprised and I couldn't find it by scanning through, but if you just type in surprise, then you know exactly which emoji to click. There are GIFs. There are some settings, and we'll actually not in chat. In chat, I think this all defaults. I'm sure your admins can turn off some of these things, but if it's turned on, you'll see the collection of GIFs. On everything is you know, free to use. Microsoft has covered the copyright bases. Stickers are kind of cool because you can add captions to them, or if they already have captions like this one, you can edit those to change it to whatever caption you want. So I should have just put one in there so you can see how it looks in the chat. And then this is a button that I didn't realize was here for the longest time, but You can quickly schedule a meeting with this person by clicking the schedule a meeting icon. I find that would be a lot more helpful, like if I was in a group chat like this one. There's Mark. Um, if I want to schedule a meeting with these characters, just with one click, their names are already entered in. So that can be handy. Okay, and while we're talking about messages, so Mark sent us a message just to make sure we all knew how much he was enjoying his vacation. And if it makes you sad because you're not on vacation, all you have to do is point at Mark's message and this reaction bar comes up. So I encourage people, people who are on social media probably don't need encouragement, but if you don't use social media too much, you might hesitate. Never hesitate to click the thumbs up button. It lets people know that you saw their message, lets people know that you're good with it. And it can be really appreciated by somebody who isn't sure, you know, if people even saw it. Now there is this new feature that I have, you see this little tiny eyeball down here, it's only next to the messages that you send. And when you point to it, it says it was seen by everybody in this chat. So everybody here saw that my attempt at a skiing pun. So a chairlift pun, actually. So let's see, I think that covers it for reacting. Oh, the other thing, if I decided that, you know, that wasn't that funny, and I wanted to delete it, or for whatever better reason than that, I wanted to delete a message. When I click the reaction bar, I see the 3 ellipses, and these are some genuinely valuable Easter eggs. You can edit your message. If I wanted to say, hang in there, you loser, and then I just click the little check mark, and that's how it appears. Notice that now it says edited. So that's good to know. And likewise, if you delete a message, it'll be replaced with a little line that says this message has been deleted. When you point at a message that someone else sends, you cannot delete their messages. And likewise, you can't delete the whole chat, but you can delete or edit things that you sent. Okay, how we doing on time? We're pretty good. I'm going to keep motoring on then. And that was pretty much it for what I had for chat. Maybe I'll go back to the meeting space real quick and see if there's any questions that I can answer really quickly. Yeah, so Alexis, it's really hard for us to, every organization is different and you're all coming in from different places. So we'll try to, maybe you can share your screen with us later if you're able to hang around for a while after the meeting, and we can look and see if we can figure out what's going on. So let's go move on to Teams, the team space in Teams, which is a little confusing. But again, here in this list, next to the left roll, are a list of the teams that you belong to. I did some housekeeping before the meetings. You can hide teams. You know, if a project has wound down, or if it's something that you're not that engaged in anymore, you can just hide them so that your space doesn't get totally cluttered. But so I'm showing 2 teams here, and every team can actually, let's define what a team is before I go into what is inside them. So teams are just dedicated spaces that are set up to focus on whatever the team owner specifies. So it could be a project, it could be a team for your whole department, it could be a team on a big subject, like say it's inclusivity and somebody decided just for some reason to start a team on that topic. That's actually a topic I think would be better in Yammer. And people ask a lot of times, how do I know which collaboration space to use? That's a hard question to answer. It takes, I think, some getting familiar, and you'll see teams are a little more formal than Yammer group. A Yammer group is where, you know, everybody's kind of just in there as an equal, where in a team, there's a little bit more hierarchy and structure typically, not always, but just, you know, for what it's worth, if you're wondering, how do I know when to set up a team? That's my opinion. Okay. So I started to say, and I mentioned earlier, teams always have at least one channel. So every team that gets set up in your organization is going to have a general channel. And in this case, we set up a couple of additional channels, and we're going to, in fact, let's click on this provisioning channel. So the main thing that happens in channels is a lot like chat in the chat area, but there are some significant differences. So this is what the post tab looks like in our provisioning channel. So channels have tabs, just like chats have tabs. The post chat is the primary one. And this is a little demo site. We haven't had a lot of activity here. But the reason I'm showing this one is to show you that unlike a chat where one person says something, then the next person, then the next, and it's strictly, you know, things are just spooling out as they happen. In a channel, you have what's called threaded conversation. So when someone starts a new conversation, you really need to get in the habit of replying to that conversation if that's what your intention is. It starts to get really irritating. If somebody started down here and said, "Thanks, Rick," how do we, you know, assuming that there's been a bit more activity in this channel than this particular one shows, it might not be clear what you're thanking him for. So if you click reply and say, "Thanks, Rick," then it's attached to his original conversation, and that's the right way to do it. Okay, so let's look. I mentioned that this is the post tab. The channels also always have a files tab. This particular channel doesn't have any files. Let's go up to our general channel. It's got a few files in it. So these were things that were shared in posts potentially, or they can just be added. You can just click new and add it to this channel if it's a file that you know the people who are active here would be interested in. So this is just a quick and easy way to find things that members have posted here in the channel. The wiki tab, every general channel comes with a wiki tab. It might be that every channel comes with a wiki tab, I forget, but you can delete it if you're not going to use it. And if you're not going to use it, you probably should delete it. You can always add one back later. In this case, though, we went ahead and took advantage of the fact that the general tab has the wiki, and we put some content in, and we think this is a best practice that every team would probably benefit from posting some team norms in the wiki on the general tab. So that's something to think about. So now what I want to do is go into adding a channel. And as it turns out, I am the owner of this particular team. And I am one of the owners, I should say. So when I click on the ellipse next to the team name, I get the ability or the option of adding a channel. Now, if I'm simply a member at this team and I'm not an owner, I still have the ability to go in to add a channel in the same way. But the capabilities for the team owner, actually, this is not popping up exactly. Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It looked different in a tenant I was in yesterday. So we go ahead and type in the channel name and a description if you want to. You can set the privacy. If you're in a government tenant, you won't have this capability yet. It's actually quite new for everyone, but it is possible to set up private channels, and that really goes beyond the scope of our introduction today. But the owner of a team can also, when he or she creates a channel, click this box to say automatically show this channel to everyone in their channel list. Now, the thing the team owner needs to keep in mind is that people can change that setting for themselves. Everyone has the ability to decide which channels show up in that list on the left for them. So, and you will find as teams, here's a team that that I belong to at BA. And there are 3 hidden channels that I'm not following because they're not relevant to me. But I can always change that setting. Guess how? By the ellipse. So here's a channel on our webinars, and I can simply choose to hide that, and it goes away. It keeps my desktop a little cleaner, but I go back to my list of hidden channels and show it. And I can, just for good measure, to make sure it'll always be there, I can click show from the ellipse. So what else was I going to say about adding channels? I think that's just about it. Oh, so yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about team owner capabilities. I don't know how many of you on the call might be team owners, but you might be curious if you're not as to some of the things they can do. So everybody has this managed team. When they click the ellipse next to the team's name, they have the managed team pops up in the menu, and it's a good place for everybody who's on the team to look when they need to remind themselves of who else is on the team. In the case of this demo team, we have 3 owners and no members, so it's pretty silly. But anyhow, pretty not typical. Maybe that'd be a better way for me to say it. But the owner also has a tab for maybe people who have requested to join. Their channels tab looks a little different. They have this column that allows them to say, I want everybody to see that channel. They can turn that on or off. They have an add channel button here as well. And so does so members get something that looks quite similar to this. There are just a few minor changes. The thing I really wanted to point out about owners is that they have some controls over settings within the team. Here's where you add a team picture. Here, this member permissions is an important one to look at. We had in one of our clients, a team owner was appalled to find out that the members of his team were able to delete a whole channel from their team. I think they were able to restore it, but even so, I think he went in and unchecked this box. So I think the default is probably to have all of these checked. I'm not sure about the private channels one, but if you are an owner, it's something to look at and be aware of. The other thing that I wanted to point out is down here under fun stuff. Your organization might have some admin settings for allowing like GIFs and stickers and custom memes and things like that. But if you have some personal preferences, you can come in here and make some adjustments. For example, if you, like me, I try to use GIFs, but I generally don't really like them because it's, for some reason it like feels like it wants to give me a headache with that motion that won't stop. So you can enable them or disable them. You can also choose the kind of content that's available in the GIFs. You can make it a little bit more business-like. The moderate ones are like PG-13, while the strict ones are G rating in terms of like a movie rating. So real quickly, I'm going to also change subjects now and talk a little bit about your team's profile. So you get there by clicking on your avatar up in the upper right corner. You can do things like changing your picture. You can change your presence if you want to appear away when you're not away. It's easy to set. You can set a status message that appears in Teams. I wanted to just point out settings. This is worth looking at. And one important thing, if I don't know if this happened, nobody mentioned it, so I won't mention it either because we're really running out of time. But this notifications area is worth looking at. This will be set up with some defaults. If you have a very, very active team, you may, for one good suggestion is to go in and by clicking the ellipse next to channel names, you can choose to follow or not follow channels. And if you do not follow them, then you won't get notifications of activity in those channels. So that can be really helpful. I encourage people to leave banner and email is the strongest setting you can go for. I encourage people to leave that on, but you know, unfollow channels you're not interested in to keep you know, the distractions manageable. And another thing to know is this email, it's not going to send you an email every time someone sends you a chat message. It's only going to do it periodically, and you have control. Going down here under missed activity emails, you have control over how often you would want an email sent to you when someone mentions you in a chat or chats with you, for example. So that's really important to especially when teams are new. You want to stay engaged and you don't want to lose touch, but it might start driving you crazy. So there are some ideas for for setting your notifications so that they don't drive you crazy. I'm trying to I should have done this before the meeting. So yeah, here under channel notifications, you can change your notifications per channel. Actually, I think this changed since the last time I looked at it. So that happens a lot in Teams. Microsoft is continually improving it, so don't be surprised. So we have a few minutes, and I want to turn things over for a second to my colleague, Mark Beach. So Mark, go ahead and unmute yourself, and I will get back into the meeting space and share your slide. Mark had some thoughts he wanted to share with people about some infrastructure related topics during these challenging times.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Do you have that? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so we just wanted to talk about this very briefly. We've had a lot of people asking us about the transition to moving people to working from home, which a lot of people are rapidly trying to do at the moment. Just wanted to talk about some things to think about, and just to offer our services in any of these areas if it's something that we can help with. Our approach would be kind of to build personas of your users, so you can understand who can work from home, and of each one of those personas, what kind of groups of applications they may need that they don't have already, or some people may be able to function pretty well with just the bare minimum. And then in addition to that, if you are adding extra functionality, like some users may not be licensed for Teams already, it's important to consider that and assess the benefits of the different licenses for different users to minimize your cost increase there. And then also your current client hardware, understanding what percentage of the workforce has a mobile device that's company owned and secured, and if they can use that at home. We can also build some online surveys to sort of identify just readiness in general to work from home, like what kind of connection do people have? Do they have their own hardware that they could use? If so, maybe we can gather some information about that and sort of present that in some kind of a graphic to show you where your problem areas may be. And then training and documentation. A lot of people may not have worked from home before, so we can put together things like job aids that people can print out to understand how to set up their VPN connection, or webinars or videos. We can definitely help with all that kind of thing. And then sorry. Yeah, if people are, if you do make the move for to allow personal devices onto your environment that previously have not been, it's important to have some kind of a strategy to understand how to secure those devices and not sort of open up any vulnerabilities in your environment. If you don't have enough hardware and you don't want to use personal devices, maybe you need to purchase and provision new hardware, new laptop for home users. And the current infrastructure, it's important to assess, can that take the load, and where does it need to be scaled? It may be a case where some workloads may be moved to Azure, which will relieve the load on your internal network infrastructure. Certainly something we can help with. And then overall, we just need to make sure that during this transition, there's a good strategy in place to make sure that we're not expanding our security footprint and allowing for bad actors to exploit us in this kind of time. So just some things to think about. And if you need assistance with any of this, we can certainly help.
Thanks, Mark. Okay.
Yep, no problem.
I was really nearly done. I don't think I talked about this slide, which was using Teams across platforms. And Mark mentioned several things related to this. And I mentioned earlier, I use Teams on my phone all the time, and I love it. It works really well. But it depends if you have a phone issued by your employer. That's one thing. I went ahead and downloaded the Office 365 suite for my phone and clicked yes when it said, do you allow your employer to control this device? I trust my employer not to wipe out all my music for me, so I think we're going to be fine. If you're squeamish about that, then this might only apply to you if you have an employer provided device. I do think that Teams is great in the browser. Unlike some of the other apps, I hate using Word in the browser, for example. Sorry, Microsoft, but I've had really good luck with it. So go ahead and check out using it on other devices. And then, oops. Oh, I knew that was going to happen at one point. So I need to get back to, I want to show our contact screen. So in case anybody does want to get in contact with any of us, I'm Judi Pfancuff, and feel free to email or call me. Our marketing guys are listed here as well. They would all love to chat to see if there's anything that they can help you with. If you are a guest with us today and do have some questions you'd like to ask in the chat area, please just don't click the red hang up button and stay on, and I will continue to chat back and forth with you until we get as far as we can with answering your questions. And if you're one of my BA colleagues, you will be able to come back into Teams and see the chat from your chat area. And so with that, I like to thank everybody for joining us. And we will now conclude the webinar again, except for those who want to hang out a bit longer in the chat area. Thanks again. Bye.